Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I was a junior technician. I ran cables, labeled ports, coiled XLR lines, changed bulbs, and fixed lights. When the world fell quiet, I locked myself inside Studio 5 of WDKV, the television station on the east side of town. The building was concrete and glass with a steel frame, 3 stories tall, and designed to keep sound in and weather out. We still had backup power. I moved fast and sealed doors I knew the keys for, slid crash bars into place, and checked the generator levels in the loading bay. I used the control room to broadcast SOS messages and looped a warning tape. But now, someone has been altering my broadcast files. And when I check the security cameras, I see movement on the catwalk above the set. I have not seen another living person in 18 days. I do not know if I am being helped or hunted. WDKV sits in a light industrial zone north of the river, 2 blocks off the freight line and a short drive from the university. The station uses a studio to transmitter link on a microwave dish aimed at Ridgecrest Tower, a hilltop site outside the city where our main transmitter sits behind a chain-link fence crowned with barbed wire. We also lease fiber paths to a backup transmitter on the West Ridge. The studio is where I am. The transmitter is 15 miles away. My problem is that the studio can be safe for a while, but the transmitter needs power and regular checks. If that site goes dark, my broadcast goes silent. On the day I locked in, the main anchor had already signed off and left messages for any staff who were still on the road. The news director's office door was open, her jacket on the chair and her badge tossed on the desk. Most people left in a hurry. I stayed because I knew this building better than I knew my apartment. The station had food in the break room, bottled water in cases, first aid kits in every control room, and a diesel tank for the generator mounted in its own containment pit near the loading dock. A building like this is designed to keep broadcasting during storms. Now, the storm was different, but the engineering is the same. I started with power. In the mechanical room, the generator's controller screen showed the engine at idle, coolant temperature stable, oil pressure normal. The tank read about 1,000 gallons, which is good. At a standard load, this unit drinks roughly 6 to 8 gallons per hour. That gives me somewhere between 5 and 7 days of runtime if the building is fully live. But broadcasting does not require the whole building. I began shutting down non-essential circuits. I turned off studio cyclorama lights, lobby lighting, and the vending machines. I left on the control room, the server room, the newsroom for now, and 1 studio. A smaller load lowers the fuel burn. Then I checked the core network. Our automation server handles schedules, switching, and the playout of recorded shows and commercial spots. It sits in a rack with redundant power supplies fed from 2 separate, uninterruptible power systems. The playout storage is a clustered set of drives that can lose 1 or 2 disks without losing any content. The router ties sources to destinations across a baseband video matrix and IP inputs. None of that matters if people are not out there to watch, but all of it matters if I am trying to reach anyone who might be scanning the channels on a small television. I made a loop. It was not a polished piece, it was a simple message over legible graphics. White text on a black background, a calm voice, no music. The voice was mine, speaking steadily into the audio console's preamp with the compressor set to keep the level even. I said the same things every civil message used to say, but with details I could confirm. I gave our city name, our river name, 3 main streets, the highway numbers, and simple instructions to shelter, to boil water, to avoid crowds, and to look for posted notes in bright tape at visible intersections. I gave the date and the time at the top of each hour. I set it to repeat. For the emergency alert system, I use the encoder in the rack with the front panel touchscreen. It is meant to insert alerts, tones, and text crawls for official notices. I do not have official notices now, but the system still lets me send a generic emergency message. The alert tones are standardized so old sets react. I configured a weekly test as a real alert with the crawl text pointing to our channel and our schedule. It felt strange to use that tool without the proper authorization. But the city's own stations were dark, and radio was mostly static. The first days followed a rhythm that felt like a job. In the morning, I walked the facility with a flashlight and a checklist. I cleaned air intake filters on the electrical room because the diesel engine pulls dust into everything. I checked oil and coolant levels, confirmed the network switches were not throwing errors, and verified the server room temperature stayed around 72 degrees Fahrenheit. I ate from the break room. Oats, nuts, granola bars, and canned soups I warmed on an induction plate. I kept one studio light on low to preserve my sense of day and night. At night, I sat in the control room with 2 monitors devoted to the internal camera system. The studio cameras are for shows, but the building has fixed security cameras down the main hallway, in the parking lot, above the loading bay, and near the roof access. I set motion markers on those feeds. The first nights were quiet. The motion markers were set too sensitive, so dust and insects sometimes triggered them. I lowered sensitivity, masked a window reflection, and removed 2 dead views. On the 4th night, at 1:17 a.m., the motion box for Studio 5 turned red. The timestamp burned into my mind because of the way the number changed when the box appeared. I switched to the camera that looks down from the back of the room. The studio was dark except for the tally lights above the cameras. The grid of steel beams hangs overhead. We call it the catwalk, though it is more of a lattice. A figure moved across the grid. The shape was slight. It moved carefully, using the rails instead of the panels. I saw a faint reflection from a small light or a phone screen. By the time I got to the studio door with a flashlight and a handheld light for self-defense, the grid was empty. I did not shout. The room was too large and empty for shouting. I used the flashlight beam slowly and traced the floor, the set pieces, the ropes, and the ladder that leads up to the grid. The ladder is a steel run with round rungs and a gate that snaps shut at the top. The gate was shut. I put my ear to it and listened. I could hear the low sound of the building's air handling system and the soft ticking of metal cooling. No footsteps, no breath. I went back to the control room and rewound the feed. The figure had crossed from the corner above the audience riser to the far wall, paused, then moved along the north beam toward the set. I marked the time and set up a short loop. Then I checked the playout server. My loop file was not the same size it had been. The automation server showed the file had been modified at 12:58 a.m. I do not keep the system on automatic write permissions for shared folders. I had locked down access to one user. I checked that user's log. The modification came from the console in Studio 5, not from my seat. I loaded the file into an editor and scanned it. The video was unchanged. The audio had a layer buried below the main track. Someone had added a whisper track. It is a track that would be inaudible unless you knew to listen and boosted it. I patched it through a separate channel and lifted the gain slowly. A voice came through in pieces. The words were spaced out, as if the speaker wanted the edits to line up with the gaps between my sentences. The voice said, "North stair, 4 floors, roof hatch, midnight." We do not have 4 floors. We have 3 and a roof. The north stair is the one that goes from the lobby to the 2nd floor and up to the roof. The hatch is in the penthouse where the HVAC units sit. The word midnight is direct. I had a choice. I could ignore it, lock down harder, and let the figure move again. Or I could try to make contact and control the conditions. Before I made that choice, I checked the building perimeter again. The parking lot camera showed a sedan that had not been there before, parked at an angle near the edge of the visitor spots. The windows were dusty. The front tire on the driver's side was low. The trunk lid was tied shut with a strap. I used the camera to zoom. There were boxes in the trunk labeled with tape. One label read cables. Another read water. The license plate was a local plate from our state. I took a breath and put my plan in order. I am not a soldier. I am not a guard. I was always the junior tech who quietly did work. But I know this building. That is the one advantage I have. I wrote a note in large block letters on a white poster board from the prop closet and placed it in the lobby facing the glass. If you are alive and can read this, come to the North Stair at midnight. Do not bring anyone else. Then I prepped Studio 5 with a low light level and switched the motion detection to a higher sensitivity zone around the ladder and grid. If the figure did not want to meet, I would at least catch more detail. I went to the equipment cage and checked the lock. The cage holds stands, lamps, gels, clamps, and a few old tools. I keep a simple set for self-defense in the control room. A sturdy flashlight that can be used to strike if needed, a can of pepper spray from the desk drawer, and a wooden handle from a broken rake I had cut down and sanded. I also had a tool bag with a voltage tester, a multimeter, zip ties, and duct tape. I put those near the stairwell. For the meeting, I wore my station hoodie with the logo, so I would look like staff and not a stranger. I set my radio on my belt. The radios do not reach far outside the building, but inside they cover the floors well. I clipped a small lapel mic under the collar and ran it to the radio so I could speak softly. I turned the volume down to avoid feedback. At 11:57 p.m., I stood at the bottom of the North Stair. The stairwell smells like dust and paint. The emergency lights are low and steady, fed by their own battery packs. At 12 o'clock midnight, the stairwell door at the top opened a few inches. A small beam of light appeared and then went off. I spoke the simplest words I could. I said, "I am alone. I work here. Are you alone?" A voice answered from the second-floor landing. It was a young voice, with edges from fatigue and dehydration. "Yes," the voice said. "Sorry about the files. I wanted to prove I could reach you without making noise." We met in the middle of the flight where the light from the emergency fixtures was enough to see faces. The person was maybe 20, short hair, dark hoodie with a university crest, a small pack on their back, hands visible, no obvious signs of injury. They kept one hand on the rail. The other hand held a small screwdriver. "My name is Maya," the person said. "I delivered food here sometimes. I'm a media student. I know the building. I came because the broadcast said you were here." "I am Alex," I said. "I run cables and fix lights. I locked in when things went quiet." We stood there for a full minute without moving. I watched her eyes and her hands, and she watched mine. People are a variable. The world feels dangerous enough without adding more variables. But her broadcast edit was smart. It used the path of least resistance. She had not tried to shout through doors or pound on windows. She had used the system as it was built. "Someone tried the loading bay door yesterday," she said. "A group." I hid behind the set wall. I think they saw the truck and thought there was staff here. I did not let them in. I left water bottles and moved back into the grid. That would explain the motion on the studio camera. It also meant the station was not invisible. Vehicles parked out front and steady power are signs of life. I needed to reduce signs. We agreed to darken the lobby and move the sedan to the side lot behind a dumpster if we could get it to start. We walked through the building together, slow and methodical. We used headlamps on low power and kept beams pointed down. In the newsroom, we took a stack of old hand sanitizer bottles and refilled them from the last 5-gallon jug in the break room. In the server room, I showed Maya how to read the status lights on the network switches and where the spare fans are stored. In the control room, I let her sit at the audio board while I showed her the program path from the playout server to the router and out to the transmitter link. Maya knew more than I expected. She had helped on student shoots and had been on tours here. She remembered where the fuse box was for the lobby sconces and how the set flats roll out on casters. She moved quickly and quietly. She also had something I did not have, a small handheld set for long-range radio. It was a hobby device, not a professional unit, but it had a battery and an antenna she had learned to tune. She had been scanning the air and said she'd heard 2 repeaters with brief bursts of voice in the last week. We made a basic pact that night. We would keep broadcasting. We would try to reach anyone who could receive, and we would listen for anyone who might be trying to transmit. We would also maintain a low profile. We moved 2 cameras to new angles that covered the stairwell and the roof access. We hung thick black duvetine fabric over the lobby glass doors from the inside to kill reflections and reduce light bleed. We set the studio to the lowest power levels that kept the cameras functional. Over the next days, the work got specific. We inventoried food: 2 cases of protein bars, a case of canned soup, 12 cans of beans, 8 cans of diced tomatoes, 6 bags of rice, 3 jars of peanut butter, 4 boxes of crackers, and single-serve oat cups. We inventoried water: 26 liters in bottles, plus what the building's water heater held, which is a tank I could drain if needed. We inventoried fuel: 930 gallons after the first week of load reduction. I built a spreadsheet on a newsroom computer and set daily checkboxes for generator hours and fuel estimates. We wrote a schedule on a whiteboard. Mornings were for maintenance. Midday was for monitoring. Afternoons were for exercise in the hallway with careful steps and low noise. Evening was for broadcast updates. Night was for security watches in 2-hour shifts. We did not stay in the same room to sleep. We rotated between the small voiceover booth and the makeup room, each with a door we could block. That way, if one room had a problem, we would not both be inside it. Broadcasting changed when we started to receive messages. The first was a brief, almost clipped series of numbers and letters over the handheld long-range radio. It repeated on the hour. It said, "Ridgecrest, power low. Generator 60%. Need diesel, channel 12 expects tower up." The voice was older, a man, steady. He gave a simple call sign that matched the engineering supervisor who used to manage the transmitter site. That man had retired 3 years ago, but his voice was the same. My stomach pulled tight. If the transmitter site was alive, then someone had kept it running. If the person was asking for diesel, then the main tank at the hill site was low. If that site goes dark, our broadcast ends. The station's inside generator does not feed the transmitter on the hill. They are separate. The hill has its own tanks behind its fence. There's a risk floor for every trip outside. The route to Ridgecrest Tower runs through the valley and up a 2-lane road that switchbacks along the slope. The hill has a fire road around the top that goes to a gate with a padlock. I had a copy of the key in the engineering desk. We still had a station pickup in the loading bay, a white half-ton with the logo. It had a quarter tank of fuel and a bed I could load with drums. We had a transfer pump in the mechanical room with a nozzle and hose. The building's diesel is dyed red and is meant for generators, not road vehicles, but it can run a diesel engine in an emergency. We planned like we were setting up a remote shoot. We listed gear, bolt cutters in case the hill gate was jammed, the padlock key, the transfer pump, 2 55-gallon drums, a hand truck, tie-down straps, gloves, rags, funnel, and a spill pan. We added a first aid kit, water, and heat-resistant sleeves. We packed a paper map with the route and circle marks for 2 alternate paths in case the main road was blocked. We loaded the drums using the dock plate and secured them in the truck bed. For defense, we kept it simple. I carried the same sturdy flashlight and pepper spray. Maya carried the wooden handle and a compact flashlight. In a locked drawer in the news director's office, we found a personal item that had been left behind, a small carbine. It had a clean barrel and a lock on it. We also found a locked case with a simple pump-action shotgun that had been used for gear demonstrations once, stored separate from any shells. We are not careless with these tools. We inspected them and left them in the rack, unloaded. Our plan is to avoid confrontation, to back away, to keep distance, to use the vehicle's horn only if needed to move animals. We waited for a day with clear weather and no visible movement around the building. At dawn, we rolled the truck out. The street was quiet. We drove slow to keep noise down, staying under 25 miles per hour. We moved through the light industrial strip where delivery docks sit empty. We passed the university, where posters were still taped to lampposts with dates from last month. The main highway had empty cars angled on the shoulder. We did not stop. We crossed the river on the East Bridge and took the Hillcrest exit. The 2-lane road was narrow and had fallen branches. We steered around them. At the mountain gate, the padlock was new. The chain had scratches. Someone had been here recently. I used the key and the lock turned. We drove up to the transmitter building. It is a small concrete blockhouse with a steel door and a mesh cage around the fuel tanks. A tall fence surrounds the antenna mast. The mast is red and white with a blinking light at the top. The beacon was still on. The backup generator behind the blockhouse sat on its pad, a smaller unit than the station's main, but still large. When I opened the building door, a man stepped back from the rack. He had white hair and a short beard. He wore an old station jacket and carried a clipboard. He did not reach for any weapon. He raised his free hand in a slow wave and said my name. He was the retired engineering supervisor. He had been living up here since the first week. He had stocked the place with canned goods and had siphoned fuel from the Hill's maintenance truck. He had kept the transmitters within safe temperatures by cycling them at lower power during midday heat. He had used a small battery radio to listen to my broadcasts and had waited for a message that said we could coordinate. He had left signals on the repeater when he knew he had to ration fuel. We got to work with the transfer pump. The drums rattled when we rolled them on the hand truck. We grounded the pump to the tank so we would not build static, and we laid a spill pad under the nozzle. I watched the sight glass fill while the diesel flowed. We filled 2 tanks on the hill and topped off the generator day tank. We cleaned the nozzle, wiped down the pump, and sealed the drums. We kept a running tally on the clipboard. We did not want to drain the station for the hill. We wanted both sites to last. Before we left, the supervisor, his name is Mr. Talbot, showed us a shelf with spare boards for the transmitter. He showed us which caps tend to swell after long heat cycles and where to find the schematics. He was calm and spoke in short, clear sentences, the way good engineers do when they teach. He said the top light is healthy. He said the antenna has good standing wave ratio, which means the power is not bouncing back down the line. He said the feed line is dry and the dehydrator is keeping moisture out. Back at the station, we updated the broadcast with new details. We added a line that said the broadcast will repeat on the hour and that a live voice will speak at the half. We said we could hear 2 local radio repeaters and would listen. We asked for simple reports: the name of a road, the direction of travel, the presence of a working well, or the presence of a hazard. We asked for no names beyond first names. We said we would not share anyone's location unless they asked us to. The messages started slow and then became a pattern. At 10:30 a.m., a person named Pete said he had set a water collection barrel in the park on the south end and that it was clean. At 2 p.m., a person named Santa said the grocery on 5th had a steel gate and that she had seen 3 people there, waving, who did not speak. At 4 p.m., a short message said, "Bridge West blocked by fallen bus." We logged everything with times and repeated the important items on our loop, rotating them every 2 hours so the information stayed current. It felt like a fragile network built out of air. We were careful not to say anything that could attract people to the building. We used the word relay instead of station location. We kept the doors locked and covered. We lowered the building's exterior lights at night and used only internal lights with shades. We moved the truck behind a row of dumpsters and covered it with a tarp. On the 12th day after Maya arrived, the security camera above the loading bay caught motion at 3:11 a.m. 3 figures went to the door, looked at the keypad, and then stepped back to the edge of the frame. One of them tried the handle. The door did not move because the crash bar inside was locked. They waited, as if expecting a response. After 10 minutes, they left. We stayed silent. The next day, the loop file changed again. This time, it was not Maya. She was with me in the control room when the file timestamp updated. I traced the change to an editing console in the newsroom. We turned our heads at the same time and listened. There were small sounds in the ceiling above the newsroom. Metal creaks, the sound of a hand brushing a duct, a soft clank when a knee hits a beam. Someone had learned how to move across the building silently. I did not announce anything that would corner a person who could be afraid. Instead, I opened the file and checked the added track. It was not a voice. It was a set of tones. They were standard, like test tones in an audio calibration. They formed pairs and repeated in an order that felt deliberate. Maya recorded them and ran them through a small program that shows frequency graphs. The pairs lined up to numbers if you use the frequencies as digits. It was a number string separated into 4 parts. I looked at the string and thought of the building. The station uses 4-digit codes for some local devices, but not this long. The only place I use a series like that is on the roof security panel. The roof hatch is locked with a keypad in the stairwell that needs a sequence to unlock. The existing code is 1 number. This sequence was 4 numbers with pauses. I went to the stairwell and tried the sequence. The panel beeped, the light went green, and the hatch motor unlocked. We stepped onto the roof in a low crouch with hats pulled down against glare. The roof is cluttered like most TV station roofs. There are HVAC units, radio antenna masts, a weather camera dome, lightning rods, and the microwave dish for the transmitter link. The dish is pointed to the hill and is mounted on a steel frame with bolts in the concrete. The link is stable when no one kicks the frame. I did not see anyone at first. Then a head appeared above the beam behind the dish. A person slid out on the catwalk rung we use for maintenance, keeping their body low. They wore a painter's mask and a hat, and their hands had work gloves. Their eyes were sharp above the mask, watching everything. They held up a card with letters printed in black marker. "Do not call out. I am friendly. Keep distance." We mirrored the gesture. I raised both hands to show empty palms and set them on my cap. Maya did the same. The person nodded, then slid a thin envelope across the concrete with a stick. Inside was a list of times and places around the city, each with short notes like "smoke near school," "lights on in 3rd floor," and "sound of a generator at midnight." The notes matched our logs on several days. Someone had been scouting and cross-checking our reports. We tried a simple line of communication. I wrote, "Why alter files?" The person wrote back, "To show skill and to set up trust without voice." Then they raised the card and tilted it toward the dish. On the back were more numbers and a simple diagram. The diagram showed the dish angle and a small arrow with a degree mark. The note said our link was off by 1 degree due to wind. That matched a brief signal dip we had seen on a windy night. The person corrected it by hand and our signal strength went up. We learned the person's name was Jonah. He had worked night shift for a contractor that serviced air handling units around the city. He had keys for many roofs. When the city changed, he stayed on roofs and catwalks as much as possible because he felt safer there. He listened to our broadcast and began to check the link path because he knew the dish on our roof and the tower line of sight on the hill. He wrote that he did not trust voices. He trusted numbers and drawings. We respected that. The three of us made a triangle of roles. I maintained the inside systems and wrote the daily checklists. Maya handled the message intake, sorted reports, and recorded daily updates with a clear voice that sounded like a public service announcement. Calm, steady, detailed. Jonah ran rooftop checks across a small grid of buildings and watched the streets from above. He reported by card or by tones through the file edit when he needed to tell us something fast. With 3 people, we could think bigger. We decided to build a passive way to help anyone passing through the city without revealing where we were. We called it the Beacon Route. It was a path across 6 intersections where we put small reflectors on stop signs and taped simple cards under the lip of the signs that said, "Tune to 12 on the dial, 2 notches left of the middle," which is how some people think about radio when they do not know numbers. We added arrows that pointed toward a public park with a working hand pump we had confirmed. We recorded a special loop that played at the top of the hour with the words, "If you are hearing this, you are not alone. Keep moving. Keep your light low. Stop where you can see the sky." Then the weather changed. The forecast service is gone, but you can still feel the pressure shift. The wind picked up from the west and brought cold air. The building's rooftop units hummed louder. Our diesel generator in the station started to surge under the wind load because the louvers shook and messed with intake airflow. I put foam wedges in the vents to keep the air path steady. In the transmitter house, Mr. Talbot texted in short bursts via repeater that the hill had frost, and one of the units had faulted to a lower power level on a high-temperature reading that did not match the actual air. He suspected a sensor drift. We planned another hill trip with a different load: parts, foam, and a spare sensor. We also wanted to leave Mr. Talbot a hand-crank charging unit and more food. Jonah volunteered to go on the roof lines with us for the first leg to spot from above as we left the city. Maya would drive the truck. I would sit passenger and watch the mirrors. Jonah would leapfrog along a set of rooftops and give a signal from the last roof if the road ahead looked clear. Our signals were simple. 1 flash meant hold, 2 meant move. We rolled out at dawn again. The city felt like a shell. Store awnings flapped. A newspaper box had blown open and spilled older days into the street. A bicycle lay in the gutter with 1 pedal missing. We kept slow. At the last rooftop, Jonah gave 2 flashes and we moved onto the hill road. At the gate, the lock again turned and we climbed to the top. Mr. Talbot was waiting, steady as a lighthouse keeper, with a list of readings. The sensor was drifting because of age and heat cycles. We swapped it, calibrated the reading against an external thermometer, and brought the unit back to full power. Then we checked the dehydrator again and changed its filter. The station's link showed a good margin. All numbers went into the clipboard. Mr. Talbot told us he had heard a new voice on the repeater with a school bus driver's tone. The voice said he had a small group and was moving along the outer loop road. He had asked if any intersection had a working light. None do. We relayed the best route to avoid the collapsed bus on the West Bridge and told him about the beacon route. Back at WDKV, the lobby looked different. The fabric we had pinned inside the glass had been moved. Someone had lifted the corner to peek in and then set it back. The security camera showed a single figure in a long coat who had walked the edge of the building, paused at each door, and then left without touching any handle. The person turned their head toward the studio camera lens for a full second, as if to be seen. Then they walked away. We debated whether to ignore it, respond, or move resources to a backup location. It is not easy to move a television station. The station is where the servers and power are, but we could build a backup on a smaller scale in a different structure. The university has a media lab with a small studio. The public library has study rooms with good acoustics. The rooftop of the parking garage has a clear line of sight to the hill for a small dish. We chose a simple backup: a rugged laptop with a battery, a small audio interface, a handheld radio, and a portable dish with a pre-aimed mount that could be set on the roof corners of sturdy buildings if we needed to go light. At the same time, we needed to make the main building easier to defend without shouting. We studied the floor plan and set up layers. We added wedges to the stairwell doors. We took heavy sandbags from the scene shop and built low barriers behind two interior corners so we would have cover if someone forced a door. We ran thin trip lines with bells along the roof catwalk where someone could not see them from above. We checked that every exterior door had a longer screw in the strike plate to resist force. Then our broadcast carried the most important message we had yet received. It came as a clear, measured voice at 9 a.m. "This is Dr. Kim, formerly of City Health. I am on foot with 2 assistants. We are healthy. We have paper maps and a binder of notes on water quality and safe storage. We seek a place to store these records and a way to copy them for anyone. We have a hand pump adapter and can train on how to build it. If you can help, respond only with a time we can hear and a simple code." We were not the only ones listening. The handheld radio lit with 2 other voices talking at the same time. It was a mess of audio. We waited for the repeater timer to reset and then keyed a short note. Half-hour mark, code 1. The code meant the method we had used previously. We would repeat the confirmation 3 times over the broadcast at the half hour. We did so at 9:30 a.m., 10:30 a.m., and 11:30 a.m. At 12 o'clock, a short voice said, "Copy, South Park Gazebo, 2 hours." The park is an open place. Gazebos feel safe but can be seen from all sides. We do not like open places now. But this is not a meeting to trade supplies. This is a meeting to move knowledge. Knowledge is light and fits in a binder, but it is priceless. We prepped. Jonah took the roofline route to the park. Maya and I took the truck, then parked 4 blocks away behind a dumpster and walked the last blocks on foot. We wore plain clothes without visible logos, though mine still had the old station hoodie under my jacket for warmth. At the gazebo, 3 people stood with packs. 1 held a binder. They did not wave or call out. They watched their angles and kept hands visible. We matched their caution. We exchanged names. Dr. Kim had calm eyes. The assistants were a couple in their 30s with sensible shoes and hats. We stepped back to back under the gazebo so all 6 of us could look outward and talk quietly. Dr. Kim described their notes: how long to boil water at altitude, how to build a small sand and charcoal filter, how to store water without taste carrying over from containers, and how to test with a simple kit using a color chart. We agreed to copy the binder at the station and then make a second copy to leave in a weatherproof box at a library drop slot. We would then record a voice version broken into chapters and place it in our loop as a daily segment. Dr. Kim asked for an hour to write an updated summary. We gave an hour. The assistants walked the park perimeter slowly during that time while we sat with backs to pillars and wrote our plan. The first problem hit as a noise carried across the park. A distant generator rumble that did not belong to the city's usual sound. The kind that comes from a portable unit on wheels. It was coming from the south lot. We finished the copy of the binder with the portable scanner we had brought and packed fast. We split routes. Jonah signaled 1 flash from a rooftop, which meant hold. Then he signaled 2, then 3, which meant hold longer. We could hear voices now, not words. Just the tone of people who move with purpose and without care for noise. We stayed still and low until the sound faded and the voices moved east. Jonah's next signal said the road was clear if we moved inside shadows. We took the inner block route, cutting behind buildings, through an alley, and past a loading dock. At the truck, we waited another 10 minutes and watched our mirrors before moving. We returned to the station without being seen. We breathed like we had been underwater. At the station, we set to work. We copied the binder in full on a flatbed scanner in the newsroom and saved it to 3 drives. We printed a copy on a laser printer with toner that would last. We started recording the voice version in the small voice booth with blankets hung to deaden echoes. Maya read the sections in a steady voice. Dr. Kim listened for accuracy and adjusted phrasing so it would be easy to follow. We recorded each segment clean, with a beep at the top to mark the start. Jonah set a watch on the roof. He tied a small mirror to a pole and found angles where he could see down 3 blocks without exposing his full body. He slid back and forth along the roof edge and kept the dish in his peripheral vision. He reported that 2 vehicles were moving along the outer ring of the district and that they had a pattern. They would stop at big doors, make noise, and wait to see if anyone moved. Then they would move on. It sounded like testing. We updated the loop with a new warning. Avoid responding to anyone who makes noise at large doors. Instead, watch from a distance. If you need help, use small signals. 2 flashes for move, 1 for hold. If you are traveling in a group, walk quietly and set your own lookouts. We added the water lessons as a daily segment. We recorded a short introduction that explained Dr. Kim's background and the intent. We kept it factual. 2 days later, the long coat person returned. They did not touch any door. They placed a small packet under the edge of the fabric at the lobby glass. Inside was a hand-drawn map of the industrial district with 2 buildings shaded in red and 2 in green. The red buildings had notes. Noisy generator, people take metal, and voices at night. The green buildings had notes, quiet, solar on roof, water tanks, and workshop tools. The packet had a single sentence on a yellow card. Trade at your door at dusk in 2 nights. If you agree, place a single red tape strip on the west door. We talked it over for hours. Trade can be a trap. Trade can also be the only way to get parts you cannot fabricate. We set strict terms, only trade through the inner vestibule, with both inner and outer doors never open at the same time, like an airlock. No one enters the main hall. Trade items will be placed in a pan, slid through, and then the door shut again before any pickups. No voices above a quiet level, no names or details, only items and quantities. We wrote these rules on a card and placed it with a red tape strip on the west door at noon, when the street was empty. Dusk came. The light turned the brickwork warm and then gray. The west door camera showed a single figure with the long coat approach and stop outside the outer door. They set down a small crate and stepped back. We opened the outer door. The air was cool. The figure stepped another 2 paces back, hands visible. Maya slid our pan forward. Inside, we had 3 items: a coil of broadcast-grade BNC cable, a bag of fresh screws for the roof hatch where the threads were worn, and a small card with a list of items we needed: clean diesel, medical gloves, water test strips, and 1 working handsaw. The figure placed 4 items in the pan: a sleeve of nitrile gloves, a small container of test strips, a saw in a sheath, and a folded note that said, "Diesel unavailable here. Can offer 2 solar chargers and a panel if you can help move heavy object later." We took the items and slid the cable and screws out as payment. The figure nodded once, then stepped forward and placed the small solar panel where we could reach it through the opening. We closed the outer door, then the inner, and waited 1 minute. We opened the outer door again, and the figure and the crate were gone. I looked at the panel. It was the kind used for small setups, sturdy with a charge controller. It could keep handheld radios topped up without using generator power. That was worth more than the cable and screws we had traded away. We felt good about the exchange because it followed rules. Rules are how you survive without misunderstanding. The next morning, a storm front moved in fast. The pressure dropped and wind pushed rain in sheets. Our roof units groaned. The dish shivered. We saw the link margin drop by 2 points on the monitor, then by 4. I ran to the roof hatch with my rain hood and tether. On the roof, the dish frame vibrated. I checked the bolts and tightened 2 that had worked loose. I added tie straps to the cable bundle to keep it from catching the wind. By the time I reached the hatch, the rain had soaked me. Inside, I hung my jacket in the mechanical room, mopped the water I had tracked in, and logged the time. In the swarm of small tasks, it is easy to forget the larger purpose. The purpose is to keep a path open between people who would otherwise be alone, to keep a voice in the air, to place useful details where people can find them, to make it possible for someone to travel from one side of the city to the other without walking into a dead end. We repeated that to ourselves when tasks felt heavy. In the second week, with Dr. Kim's segments on the loop, we received a message that showed our voice had carried farther than we hoped. The voice came in at a different tone, on a handheld like ours, with the sound of wind. The person said he was on a bicycle north of town, received our water segment on a small television powered by a hand crank in a farm kitchen, and had used the method to clear muddy water. He said thanks. It landed in our chests like a light turning on. Then came the hardest night. Around 1 a.m., the loading bay camera showed motion. Not 1 or 3 figures. More. Perhaps 8 or 9. They moved with intent, checked the door, and then set something against it. We killed interior lights automatically and went to our positions. We did not fight, we used layers. The outer door is strong. The inner door is steel as well. We let them pound. The building has concrete block walls and steel framing. It vibrates but holds. They tried the side door after that. Our screws and plates held. They walked to the front and tested the glass. The glass is thick and backed by a film. They hit it with a tool, testing it. We stayed behind the interior corner barriers and watched through the cameras. The group spoke to each other. The audio capture on the camera is poor at that range, but you can still read posture and movement. They were frustrated that the building made no sound back. After an hour, they left. We did not exhale until the radio timestamp rolled over to 3 a.m. In the morning, we did not do any victory talk. We did damage checks and repairs. The west door had marks. The bay door had scuffs. The lobby fabric was torn along the edge. We replaced what needed replacing. We updated our rules. If a group arrives and tests doors, the broadcast will switch to a pre-recorded loop at a lower power while we shift to the backup on the rooftop of the parking garage using the portable dish. We rehearsed the move like a fire drill. Dr. Kim and the assistants moved on after 2 weeks with us. They took one set of binders and one USB drive with the files and asked us to keep broadcasting the audio segment. We agreed. They left us hand pump adapters and showed us how to use them. We made a copy for the library drop slot and recorded the location in the loop. We kept the voice in the air. Mr. Talbot stayed on the hill. He prefers the hill and the steady routine. He and I set a code where a 3-tone burst on the half-hour meant fuel low, and a 2-tone meant sensor drift. It is possible to store many words in a few tones when you agree on meaning. That is how we live now, by agreement on signals, by routines, by quiet. One afternoon, as Maya read the water segment and I watched the signal strength, Jonah tapped the glass and pointed up. I looked at the roofline camera. The long-coat person stood at the edge of a building across the street and raised both arms outward, then crossed them. It was a signal we had not seen before. Moments later, a vehicle turned onto our street. Slow, low to the ground, with a flatbed trailer and a portable light tower strapped to it. It stopped in front of a warehouse 2 doors down. 4 people stepped out. They set the light tower, pulled its mast up, and fired it up. The light flooded the street, and our lobby fabric glowed along the edges. Floodlights change behavior. They make shadows deep. They cancel stars. They also make it easier to record. I hit record on every camera while we killed our interior lights. The group moved to the warehouse door and used a bar to pop a lock. Inside, they wheeled out carts with coils of cable and boxes they had collected from other buildings. They did not look at our door, but the message was clear. The light showed that they could make the street bright. It could be a tactic to flush people out. We waited until they left, then we rewired our lobby cover so it had a second layer that did not glow when hit by light. We added blackout cloth with magnets at the edges. We practiced going dark in 30 seconds. We adjusted the dish mount to a second position we could swing to if someone tried to misalign it from the street with a pole. The city will not return to what it was in a month or a year. We know that, but we can keep the air clear. We can keep a signal steady. We can be the place people learn that the hand pump in the park still pulls water, that the bridge west is blocked, that the East Road is open at dawn, that the library has a box with pages on how to store beans, and that there are others listening. On the 18th day after Maya arrived, the security camera in Studio 5 showed movement again. I watched in the dim as a figure crossed the catwalk and stopped above the anchor desk. It was Jonah. He hung a small banner he had sewn from a piece of cloth with a circle and a dot in the center, the simple mark he had chosen for our relay. He hung it from a beam with care, tied the knots, and stepped back. The camera tally light reflected a small glint on the fabric. It was not much, but it looked like a symbol that might last longer than a night. We added one more segment to the broadcast. It is only 60 seconds. It plays near the top of the hour after the time and before the water chapter. It says, "If you are listening, mark your route with 2 small lines of chalk at corners, one above the other, to show others you passed safely. Do not mark if the way is unsafe. Do not put dates. Do not put names. Only the sign. We are WDKV Relay. We will repeat this at the top and the half of every hour. We hear you. There's always risk. The generator could fail. A storm could crack the dish. A group could force a door. But each day we make the numbers better. We align the dish a 1/4 degree. We top off the tanks without spills. We swap a fan before it seizes. We move one more useful voice into the loop. We record one more piece of working knowledge, like how to store grains in food-safe buckets with oxygen absorbers, or how to run a bicycle on a roller to turn a small generator that can charge a handheld radio. Maya asked me, on a day when the sun came out and the dish showed a clean margin, if I thought we should try a live show. Not a show with segments and music. A simple live hour with a phone number from an old studio phone we could route to a voice-over IP box if the line still has a dial tone. A call-in hour. We tested the line. There was no dial tone, but the suggestion stayed with me. We could build a call-in path with radio instead. Set a schedule. Let people speak for 60 seconds and then have us repeat it in clear voice so anyone with a small television could hear. It would be a risk. Lives on the air are easy to triangulate. Still, it could help. We tabled it for later. Until then, we stick to our list: wake, check generator, log hours. Verify air temperature in server room. Confirm storage-free space, listen to repeater with volume low. Walk interior perimeter, stretch in the hallway. Record 2 pages of water chapter. Update loop, climb roof. Tighten dish bolts, tune link. Wave to Jonah if he is on a far roof. Fill plastic bottles to carry to the park. Tape the next card under a stop sign. Return before dusk. Eat from the small supply we've planned for. Drink water, sleep. Wake to the hum of the building that holds us. I was a junior technician. Then I became the person who kept a light on the hill and a voice in the air. We still have backup power. We have a loop that repeats and a live segment that says what has changed. Someone altered my files. That person became a partner who writes in numbers and drawings. Another person in a long coat trades without words and maps without names. A retired engineer keeps the hill steady. A doctor shared a book that tells anyone how to keep water safe. A bus driver follows a route we drew with arrows and chalk. If you are listening, this is a relay from Studio 5. We are here. We are one station among any number of quiet stations. If your set still turns on, if your radio still takes a charge, tune at the top and the half of each hour. We will tell you the time and the weather by feel. We will tell you the safe places we know and the hazards we have seen. We ask only that you pass it on. If you must move through our streets, move like the wind through cables, steady, unseen, leaving enough behind for the next person to follow. And if you ever come to the building with the dish on the roof and the covered lobby doors, and the logo that used to mean sports highlights at 6, do not knock. Do not call out. Look for 2 small chalk lines on the corner. If they are there, it means we passed safely and the route held. Leave a card with useful words, or a small part we can use, or a small thing that helps. Then keep moving. We will keep the voice steady. We will hold the air. We will be here when you need to hear a human voice say the simple truth. You are not alone. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.